Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Due. It's can't believe this is almost like 2024. We are about to start 2025. What an eventful year of 2024. And we've been like, if you are in December of every year, there will be tons of prediction of what's going to happen 2025. So we are no exception towards that. And here we are again, kind of talk about what is going to be our prediction of 2025 and beyond. We have Ashwin as usual with us. Hey, Ashwin. And we have a special guest, Rajesh, with us. Let's not waste a lot of time. Let's jump on to this one. So, what are we talking about here? Like our prediction side, not much, broadly three categories that we are talking about, right? One is agents and agents all the way, like a jingle bell all the way. And I don't think like anyone published their prediction without agent AI. I think that's going to be like kind of a hard debate at this point of a time. No, I don't see a lot of interesting conversation around agent AI, what we're going to do in this conversation. And second is, what about human versus agent workforce? Like if an agentic AI kind of develop, what will be the future of the workforce going to be look like? And if you are a data engineer, if you are a data architect, if you are a data scientist, what should you do? What would your job look like 2025 and moving beyond? How this system going to impact our workflow, the way we are working? And third point, which is my favorite, is like data platform for 2025 and beyond. 2024 is very eventful, right? We did a lot of catalog wars, table format wars, hot acquisitions, and like all those other, and S3 table came in. It's a very happening market in 2024. So with that, let's jump on the first one, agent all the way. So Rajesh, how about start with what is really the agent means? Like, how do you define an agent?
So I think thanks Anand for having me here. And yeah, to just start with my own background, I run this company called Snippet Technologies, and we are into the data and the AI space at the cutting edge. And a lot of these thought process also has a mix of the top level view and what we see on the ground. So coming back to the topic, we talked about the agents first in our 2024 Trends publications, and you and I published in 2023 December. And at that point in time, that was just a murmur. But essentially, what we saw coming is the power of these underlying LLMs and the fact that we can move beyond information retrieval to actually using the LLM for action. Right. So in summary, the information agents as a trend where we have these new kind of applications. A lot of people now call it agentic AI applications. Now, these applications would essentially, as we would define it, not just do, let's say, things like knowledge acquisition or responding to your question, but they would also include the way you break down the problem, take action, make decisions, and get the task done. So, in a very simplistic term, an agent is essentially a system that can perceive, look at the data, act, make decisions, and use tools to get the job done. So it's just extending the definition to include all the pieces that can help us automate things.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's simply a
Yeah.
program. At the end of the day, it's another software program. Except the difference being that the way we were writing earlier versus now, you have a stochastic core with an element as its brain.
I think in the year, like when we start 2024, we started like, Gen AI kind of becoming very powerful, like creating content, creating a video. And I worked on a couple of projects that essentially summarize and trying to build some classification system on top of it, purely based on the unstructured data that we want to process. And obviously, we are going to talk about unstructured data a lot in the later part of the day. How do you see this shift from Gen AI to agentic AI kind of a model kind of evolving? What do you think that going to continue? There is always another concept, other talks about LLM hitting the wall and it's not able to scale more parameters than this one. So at this juncture, do you think moment going to continue that we will see more and more agentic AI development going to happen?
Oh, absolutely. So if we just track back and see start of 2023 to now, and in fact, we did mention at the start of 2023 that we'll start seeing smaller efficient models. And post GPT-4, we actually saw GPT-4o coming. We saw Claude Sonnet coming, and all of these are much smaller models than what GPT-4 is, or Cloud Opus is, right? So what we really understood here is that the value, which is how can we use these models to derive and do something, deliver better outcomes, really needed models which are much more ROI friendly, smaller, doesn't need that much of compute, all of that, right? So we decisively went on that path, and we did not see a model bigger than GPT-4 coming in 2024 after that. Right? So there were a lot of murmurs around GPT-5, but it never came in. Theoretically, let's assume that GPT-5 is there, but even then, the serving layer will become distilled models like GPT-4o or CloudOps, right? From an enterprise standpoint, I think 100 billion, 120 billion is a good model for getting a lot of work done. That's the first thing. The second thing that we saw is these models, when they were at the start of it, they were great with natural language extraction, summarization, those kind of use cases. Towards the year, they progressed on structured data, for example, tool calling, and those set of capabilities started becoming more reliable, right? Now, and towards the end, we talked about the fact that, hey, the models cannot get any bigger, the scaling laws aren't working. We have only one internet, and we have pretty much consumed all the diverse data that's out there, right? And then we moved on to this new paradigm called test time compute, which essentially means that you use other set of techniques to scale this model, right? We also saw that the data dimension of the model training. So earlier we would train the model with input output pairs, essentially question answers and so on and so forth. And we moved on to providing a chain of thought like data for training, right? Now, what this all means is that there are another set of dimensions to scale, which is, can these models reason? Can these models break the problem down? Can we even generalize something like a reasoning? And the first model there that came out was O1 preview. And since then, towards the end of the year, we have seen DeepSeek R3 announcing very recently, and very likely Anthropic will come with its own reasoning model pretty soon in the new year. So this new dimension is now the scaling dimension, which is really, can we get these models to work on the data dimensions instead of just compute, get them high quality data, generalized reasoning, generalized planning, all of that, right? Now, this particular trend will continue in 2025. There's another interesting dimension which we've learned, and this goes back to our days of ML, which is really that for enterprise tasks, you would need to bring in enterprise data. Even if these models are great at PhD level and all of that, they still miss the nuances of the day-to-day work. And so a lot of enterprises, including OpenAI, have now got a fine-tuning APIs for RL layer, fine-tuning APIs for the preference layer, so on and so forth, which makes the fine-tuned model versions, building fine-tuned model versions far more easier and effective. So let's say if you have your enterprise data and you want to train it with 100 or 1,000 entries, you could do it today much more easily than what you could, let's say, at the start of 2024. So a lot has changed, and 2025 is going to be about building up on top of all that we've done in 2024 and further improve. So I'm not saying everything's all good. For example, the instruction following, the reasoning, all of that has still a lot more data to cover. But we will figure out as we start building the ways to get around the current shortcoming. And like we said in 2024 as well, that the enterprises should start building. The reasoning is that the value of this agentic AI from an enterprise standpoint is just undeniable. And so even with shortcomings that exist today, there is no point waiting and watching. You should get started and you should scale up, because and as the journey for these models improve, you will join that journey, essentially.
Okay.
Good. Quick one, kind of pulling back on whatever you shared, Rajesh. Right? So what I have seen for the last 6-7 months, right, from different customers and some of our partners as well, is a lot of customers are early POCing it or piloting and creating the POEs with agents. Some of them have built knowledge management systems like internal data, unstructured data, and all of that on agents. Where do you think, and what do you think people and customers should do? Take that initial POE, and where should they do in a 6-month milestone or a 12-month milestone? What does that roadmap look like from an agent perspective, and how should customers look at it?
So, few thoughts here. The first thought is that a lot of them have actually built RAG type agents, which are more knowledge retrieval, Q&A based, all of that. These are not the systems which are doing a lot of action today. They're mostly retrieval generations, augmented generation, right? So the first thing really is, like anything else, you plan it out if you've not already. You need to plan a slew of agents. This could be purpose-built agents, or it could be agents that you procure for specific function, whatever the case. But fundamentally, the first step is you plan out where you want to be at the end of the 2025, let's say, right? If you haven't already started, and like we always say, start small, get started, get some of the projects on agents that you want to see deployed, go through the experience, find the shortcomings, trade-offs, all of that, and get few products or few agents in production initially before you actually start scaling it up. If you're somebody who is already invested in building agents and you already got a few successes behind you, you have the experience, then 2025 is about scaling. How can I build hundreds of them, essentially, right? As of that, essentially would be the way I would approach the problem.
And are we moving from a monolithic agent to what you call as multi-agent and very collaborative agent
No,
architecture?
for sure that would happen. But for that to happen, you need to have first a few agents in the first place, right? So the way it would happen is you would create the problem of scale, which is that you will have a lot of agents. But having said that, multi-agent system is not just about scaling your agent system. It's also about isolating the problems into specialized domain and then making sure that these agents don't become too complex to debug, troubleshoot, iterate. Uh, because what will happen otherwise is your chance to failure increase. Now, this is not reducing the probability of a hallucination, but what it gets you is essentially a way by which you can break a complex prompt down into smaller specialized narratives, and then you can pinpoint if something is going wrong, then hey, this agent is going wrong or this prompt is going wrong.
Correct.
Yeah, you talked about multi-agent, like especially about agents taking action. It just bring back my horrible memory where, yeah, agents are more intelligent. Right now we do that. Previously that we used to do some rule-based agents also, right? There's a fixed agent. If you have this reaction, that's how you build the feedback loop, right? So we had a rule-based engine essentially trying to operate Kafka clusters, and the system detected there is a hardware failure, and then the agents they're trying to replace a couple of brokers, and that triggered so many replication, and then that brings down our cluster completely down. And fast forward, now we are talking about here an agent can autonomically making a decision with a multiple variable factors. But at the same time, we are also talking about the hallucination, the problem in instruction following. And if I'm an enterprise and I wanted to build this agents and then to kind of building more autonomic things, should I be worried about it? If I wanted to build such system, what should I really focus on?
Absolutely, you should be, because this is not something that, in fact, it's going to be much more harder to build stochastic system or an agentic system than a role-based system that we built earlier. And the fundamental reason is this: if you give an input to a role-based system, every single time for the given input, you will get the same output, right? Whereas with agents, this completely changes, which is you give the same input and every time you get a different output.
Turned out good. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have a fairly unreliable code here, and you're trying to build a reliable system on top of unreliable code. That's really what is how, if you open up the system, it looks like. At the core of it, it's fairly unreliable, and you want reliability on top. So the way I would answer your question, and then it's a pretty interesting, deep question, is that what should I do? Now, the way I would put it is these agents will get better with their hallucination. They have gotten a lot better. They're not yet there. They will not get to zero hallucination. That's clear. This morning we saw the DeepSeek R3, which is a distilled model, trying to claim I'm ChatGPT. I'm an OpenAI based ChatGPT model. No, that's a clear example of hallucination, which is 5 times it said, hey, I'm DeepSeek R3. And the 6th time it comes back and says, I'm an OpenAI model, right? So if you go back to that example, these models are going to be as good as the data they are trained on and the preferences that you've loaded into the alignment phase, right? And there are good chances of errors there, right? So my view is that enterprises starting up in 2024 should build narrow agents. They should not completely offload reasoning to these models. They should have their own reasoning layer in the agent, feed it through a coordinated way, maybe fine tune it for your reasoning. So if you're an advanced enterprise and you actually have invested in model post training and alignment, you may even get your own chain of thought and the policy tuned into the agent. A simple example I'll take is, let's say you're an enterprise, you have your own safety policy for how these agents should deliver. You're not, unless you fine tune these models for your own safety policies, you're going to be hit by a GPT-4 policy or a Claude policy, right? You don't really want that because you don't want to change your process for these agents. So I think there are a lot of techniques out there. You will use a combination of them. You will not totally depend on these models at the core. Yes, they are important. But you will build your own deterministic layer on top, layers and layers of fine tuning, plus the software engineering. We call it composite system, which is a hybrid system, which is a combination of the stochastic core and the software engineering concept. So that is how you start. As the year progresses, you will see these models have gotten better and you may want to build broader agents, generalized agents. But I wouldn't recommend you do that at the beginning of the year as you start.
Okay. So, Rajesh, you talked about the enterprise data, right? And one of our conversations you mentioned about why we should care about LLM is that there's a whole lot of chunk data is available, and LLM still very good at what it does, that trained on that particular data, right? And we talked about enterprise data. It just reminded me today morning, my wife showed some Instagram shots, like essentially showed the CEO tell to their employee that I found you all sluggish, so I replaced you with a AI agent. And now I found my AI agent is very sluggish. And the employee say that because you trained on our data, what we wrote. So it's essentially mimicking what human behavior into the data. That's what enterprise data being generated. And that's why data engineering so far very hard to do that. And then we're also reaching this quality of data is diminishing in those other aspects. And that's the ceiling side of it, right? Now, given this technology coming to enterprise, is it fair to assume that enterprise have clean data? I think that's not a fair assumption. And then how the enterprises really are going to get utilized of this, because they are again inheriting the same problem that underlying data can have it. And what should they really prepare for it? Like,
well, I think again, this is such an interesting piece. And the real answer lies in, if you look at all these frontier companies who are leading this particular revolution, they have all invested in data discipline over years and years. So if you're looking at Google or if you're looking at even OpenAI, the first layer, even before you got these algorithms working on it, is really the data layer. Right? It forms the foundation or sort of the bedrock on which all of these goodies are going to come and help you. You're not going to be able to substitute that requirement. Having said that, these models can handle unstructured data. They can handle sometimes dirty data, not always, but sometimes, in the sense that they don't need to be exactly structured. They cannot handle incorrect data. They cannot handle, let's say, not fresh data, all of that, right? So what is the opportunity here? And what is the minimum bare requirement? The minimum bare requirements is the data trust, the trust layer, the data layer, the metadata layer. All of that is still table stake. It's not going away. In fact, it's becoming more important because now you're going to write these agents on top of it. And imagine you're serving a stale HR policy through an HR agent. That would be the last thing that you want to do as an enterprise, right?
Or even pricing, Rajesh, right? So sales, coming from a background in sales or working for sales team, sales documents gets updated, policies get updated quite frequently, and that changes.
Exactly. And this is pretty interesting. In fact, this morning there was another post. It said that the humans over years have offloaded a lot to machines, and which also means that humans will not think beyond a point, assuming and trusting machines. For example, when you're driving on the road today, you would probably try and trust Google Map. And if Google Map messes up, then you're done. In fact, there was an instance somewhere where The Google map led somebody on a flyover which went nowhere.
Yes, and they had a
Right.
glitch.
So we will start trusting these systems and we will use less and less of our own abilities to judge. And this is a natural course of automation that has happened over years and it will happen. Right. So
Actually,
the biggest challenge,
since you talked about like we are believing machine, there's a very good paper in Google called in the machine that we trust. Like some Google India did some researches about the loan process application, like human making a judgment versus machine making a judgment. The consumer or the buyer of the loan, they trust more when the machine make a decision whether you should take it or not versus the human making a decision. So we are inherently biased towards machines would be fine. Yeah.
no, when we are consumers, we want machines. When we are actually builders, we don't want them. And that's been the story. A tug of war on where we like it and where we don't like it. Having said that, there is an interesting piece here. Since we're talking about data, which is that humans can make good judgments with much lesser data. Our brains are far more tuned to that, to make a good decision on smaller. But these agents will need a load and load of data and metadata to make good judgments. You are not going to build a good agent without providing it all the information it needs. And that's really where the data layer comes in the and becomes so important for enterprises to get their agents off the ground.
So let's say if I'm an enterprise and I'm start thinking about building my agent infrastructure, what are the key components you think that in 2025, if you don't have that, and what are the things they should start thinking early that can boost their productivity or success rate, increase the success in 2025 and beyond?
So I think the larger one key trend that we pointed out in 2024 trends and now also repeats in 2025 is what we call intelligent data platform or IDP. This particular thing is important because it unifies your data plane. It unifies your metadata plane. It also unifies your governance layer. And beyond that, also it has a multi-engine orchestrator, which means that we also treat LLM as an agent. So if you have as an engine, so if you're working with multiple LLMs, OSS, it could and fine-tune LLMs, then it could also orchestrate them potentially. So my sense is that the enterprises should look at an intelligent data platform if they've not already. Many of them have already invested in one and have got, but having the platform is not enough. You still have to onboard your data, make sure the data is always, right? The data is required a whole lot of work. The data teams do are still relevant. You're going to have even more pipelines because the unstructured is now going to be onboarded on these platforms. Right? 80% of the enterprise data is unstructured. And there's a massive amount of work that's still left to onboard this unstructured data onto these data platforms. Right?
Okay.
So that's not going away. You're going to have many pipelines being written for these agents, specific agents that you've identified, consume this data in various forms. Just to take an example of, let's say, a data analyst agent or a text to SQL agent. If you were to build that today, you would, and you want to personalize it for, let's say, a sales guy or a marketing guy, then you need to know what are the data sets of interest for this particular role, this specific individual, and make sure that you ground down, depending on the query, to the right data set. Now, this is a very simple requirement, but it can be pretty challenging if you have, let's say, tens of thousands of data sets on the data platform for an LLM to figure out which is the right data. So a lot of metadata and even the user interaction, all of that needs to be available for these agents to kick off and make the difference that we want them to make.
Yeah. I think my thought on that, there was a recent conversation about, I know we are going to the data catalog side of it, but I cannot stop it.
Right. Hold on to your catalog.
No, I was trying to say that the critical part, I feel like the data and the context has to stay together because when you are building these LLM agents, you need to have the semantic meaning somewhere. And if you are building catalog or different systems, then your integration became much, much more challenging. How we are doing that, that's something that we can cover later part of it, but I think that's a key point that we need to.
No, I think the very important piece that you picked up, because one of the issue with catalog of catalogs or any of the format is the data and the metadata go out of sync and become stale much rapidly. They're not always real time and insane. And for LLMs to offer a good answer, the data needs to be absolutely fresh and accurate. You just cannot compromise.
Yeah, totally.
Good. I think we'll spark the catalog, and I think it can come a little bit later as well, because we can go for 1 hour very easily just on catalog, metadata, and semantics. But then just touching upon some of the topics that you did and highlight, right? You spoke about an unreliable core, right? You spoke about hallucination, narrow broad agents. And I think as organizations expand their agent infrastructure and build a lot more agents, how should we think about managing the life cycle of agents, particularly from a point of how reliable is my data, how reliable is this agent, how is debugging looking like, how can we look at scaling as they move from, let's say, a monolithic agent architecture to a multi-agent architecture? Like how should people put that process in frame of mind?
I think, again, this is a topic by itself, and I'm pretty close to our heart because we went through that journey in 2024. So let's rewind a little bit and see what happened in 2024. And we know that not more than 10% of the agents made it to production, right? And what really happened is essentially this. One, of course, the models were improving while people were building in 2024. They were not there at the start of 2024. That was clearly one of the reasons. But more importantly, we were missing the layers. We started getting these agent frameworks now. There are so many of them, right? Once people started using agent frameworks, they realized that, hey, these frameworks are great to get the state management, some of the other pieces, but it's so hard to debug because I'm not able to see my prompt properly and I'm not able to troubleshoot, right? So that was one issue. The second thing is, like we discussed, these are unstable core. They're almost like a combustion engine which runs a very stable airplane today, for example. So if you go back in days when we're talking about flying a plane on a combustion engine, it wasn't supposed to be so reliable because the core was unreliable, right? So this looks like a fairly similar journey where what's likely to happen is and just continuing on what I just mentioned, towards the second half, people started saying, hey, evals are an issue. Unless you have great evals and eval testing, you're not really going to be able to build great agents, right? So we realized that, yes, we need frameworks, we need evals. And then you come back and say, hey, yes, I release the agent, but then I need observability because these agents will not be the best agent or the best outcome that I see on day one, and I need to iterate through that. So fundamentally, what happened is we figured out what are the most important pieces that even a single agent development would need. Now, this is where we called out a third trend, which is an agent management system. The idea here is that you need a catalog of 5 or 6 tools to get to deployment faster. And we bundled all of that in an agent management system. And we believe that instead of picking pieces of the puzzle, you're better off on scaling agents, on monitoring agents, if you actually have something like an AMS, right? So that is one part. The AMS also helps. One of the outcome of this is that you can get your agents to production faster. For example, if you have covered the whole life cycle and all the tools you need to build those agents. The second piece here is the agent management system also helps you deploy and scale when you have hundreds of agents. So it is also foresighted in a way that we know that enterprises will not build a few agents. We know that they will have hundreds of agents. So we have already started creating a problem of scale and how we manage at scale. And this is really where the agent management system comes in the picture. It not just helps you manage life cycle of a single agent, but it also helps you manage the life cycle of hundreds of agents at scale.
And can you just define life cycle in a very short?
Yeah.
Please.
See, a life cycle of an agent is similar to a software development, except for one delta, which is that you cannot discount that the agents would need very rapid iterations compared to, let's say, this morning I've deployed an agent and towards the day I find that 3 out of 10 queries that the agent answered are wrong. You would need to go fix them right away and then test it out and make sure it is better than the previous one, right? What we call the OODA loop, which is that there is a loop here in your development cycle, which is very fast, right? So the life cycle here is you create an agent, you first define an agent, then you create the agent, then you go do the smell test, manual testing, then you go automate the testing, then you go deploy it, and then you do post-production monitoring, and then you loop back for the new features or the fixes that you need. That's really the life cycle.
Right.
Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time on agents. I think it's a very fascinating topic all the time. So if I had to summarize what we have discussed so far, if you are an enterprise, if you wanted to start experimenting on AI, start small, iterate fast, and as I just mentioned, build many. That's a probability something may not successfully in the production, but build many and then focus on building an agent management system so that can help you to scale up as you go progressing. And also make sure you follow all the software engineering best practices. Continuous monitoring should be the first thing that you should start, similar to how you want to build any application. And you have to tune the model for extreme reliability. We talked about the deterministic nature and not in a non-deterministic nature, and be ready for that side of it all the same. Right? So I think that's a key takeaway. I'd be interested to see how.
Just to add, and then the data takeaway is too important
Yeah.
to miss out. You know?
Yeah, totally.
That's where I was leaning in as well. Agents scare me for two parts, for sure. And I think it's a good segue into what we want to quickly catch up on as well. What does agents replace? And I'm already experiencing, right? Quick example, we've deployed a sales agent at Click, and earlier I used to go to PMs to ask this question. Now I just use the sales agent because PMs upload the data and then it's all done. Meaning, do I need PMs? That's a different question, obviously, as you meet them. But they're able to increase and improve their productivity a lot, but by ensuring these agents are available to answer them. And that's a good segue in probably what we also want to discuss next, right? Into workforce and how does workforce look like in a completely agent way. And I think all of us today on a given day interact with a couple of agents, right? Whether it's for our personal use or for our professional capacity, almost from Amazon to Big Basket to Swiggy in India, we're all interacting with agents. And on the workforce side, we have built agents or we're interacting with agents in some form or shape. How does this look like in 2025? Anand, Rajesh, you want to share your perspective? Anand, we'll start with you and move to Rajesh from there.
Yeah, I think it is definitely I've been using AI for a long time, right? Like write to code, like I use like at least 2 to 3 LLM to write the code. Like I ask ChatGPT to summarize something, take the requirement, put it into cloud to write a code, and then take it and go put it into Google Cloud and ask a code review. And it gives me a perfect code for me to make it execute, right? And I don't write any tests anymore. Certainly my skill sets are a lot of change. I feel like a lot empowered than a lot of threatening in my opinion. Like my productivity increased, but it's a different skill set for me to completely work on that. I think that's what I felt. AI helped me to do. That's one. But I don't know like a larger economic model. If someone starting their career as a data engineer or data architect or data scientist, how do their skill set go to change? I believe that they cannot, like we cannot live in the past skill. It's definitely a different skill set that we wanted to kind of. I always try to compare that into how industrial revolution happened in the cotton industry, where the weaving from the hand to metal machine, people from the weaver not becoming a factory worker, and then that kind of outsports, right? I feel the software engineers of 2023 is more of a weaver. In 2025, if you are not adopting ML AI way of working, then that skill set is no longer relevant for you in 2025 and moving forward. That's what I thought.
Absolutely. Look, a lot of things change. The first thing is all of our previous skills are not as valuable as they were. All of the previous SaaS generation point products, which almost all the VCs invested, are not as valuable as they were just before a couple of years. Because we had built all of these products based on a highly valuable software labor. Fundamental. Now, as building software becomes faster and faster, cheaper and cheaper, you have a problem of abundance, which means that your competition can come from anywhere, right? There is a rockstar product in the market in next 10 days, we will see like hundreds of them. And by the way, we saw this with Copilots in 2024, where we saw some very good Copilots, and then the market is full with all variations and all kinds of Copilots. So the first thing you realize is the speed at which things were changing have become even more faster, and what could be done in months can now be done in days. So you need to think hard when you're starting to build as to what are you going to build and how will it survive this kind of a challenge. That is up to you. Because if the market is big, somebody is already at you, even if he's not visible today. From a pure engineer standpoint, my sense is that like Jiwan's paradox, we are going to build more and more, not less and less. but it also means we're going to build bigger and bigger, not small and small, right? So these models can still not build larger systems. They can replicate point products. They can be an aid to an engineer to build a function, or build a class, all of that, but they cannot really build a larger product. That's the first one. The second part, which we already covered in good detail, is the agentic AI. You're not going to build plain vanilla software system now. These are going to be composite systems with LLMs being pretty much part of every software system that we have. And there's still a lot of challenges in testing some of these systems, iterating over it, so on and so forth. So the time we saved in writing code will get reinvested in making these agents reliable. So from a software engineer standpoint, you have to decisively move towards becoming an AI engineer and not be a software engineer, because that skill is no longer as valuable.
Right. Yeah.
From a data engineer standpoint, again, there is differences because the enterprises are now going to focus on a lot more unstructured than structured.
Correct.
The BI is not the primary application that's driving the enterprises anymore. So the question that you should be asking is, are you part of the new game, which is unstructured and agents? And how is data, as we discussed, data is still very important for the agentic AI applications to fly or even take off. And therefore, how are you looking at the unstructured side of the story and how are you involved in that? That's going to be quite crucial for mining. Almost 80% of the data is unstructured and it's still not there in any of the data platforms, pretty much.
Not there. Yeah.
It's a huge opportunity for data engineers and data architects to play a role and bring in, and these pipelines are going to be even more than what we had before. So you're going to have thousands and tens of thousands of pipelines, and they all need to be managed. So there's a huge opportunity here, but they're going to come from unstructured and semi-structured and the other modalities, not from the structured side alone. Right. So I don't see the jobs going away, at least for the next few years. I see that, in fact, they are more of an opportunity because we're going to build billions of agents and the humans need to be involved in that. Agents are not building agents yet. So purely from a opportunity point of view, this feels like a pre-2000 internet era opportunity where all of us were building something for internet. That
Right.
all busy building something for agents and
Yeah.
agentic automation for next few years.
I think you made a good point about like the AI agent will create code, but we make sure that the agents are working fine, and then we'll spend more time on that. That is true from a typical system thinking perspective also, right? Let's say agents by themselves, non-deterministic system, and which is equivalent to, let's say, you have an eventual consistent system, then maintaining the consistency fall back to an application. So same way, you have to build around linear abstraction layer around to make sure that it's working. There are a lot of flexibility when you have system. There's a lot of advantage if you have a deterministic system, but that's the way the nature like it. I think
I think
In fact,
the
I
engineer's
think
role
that
is going to be important.
it will need more skills than writing code, is my opinion.
Yeah.
It will not need
Yeah.
less. So
Yeah.
you would be more valuable if you're an AI engineer today.
Yeah. totally.
AI engineer with enterprise architect skill sets. I
Yeah.
think that's more valuable because you need to think of how it scales, deploys, and all of that. I think data engineers with a little bit of moment into what you said, unstructured, and thinking around a broad spectrum of how the data lands into AI, data reliability, etc. It's a core for most AI projects as well. But Rajesh,
In fact,
how do you think data
one of the
scientists will
pieces, and I think I want to re-highlight what Anand said, which is that we will spend more time managing these pipelines, data trust, if you're a data engineer. If you're an AI engineer, you will spend more time managing these agents, iterating over, right? So our time goes from generation to management or optimizing, if you want to call it that way, keeping them running, right? And that's not going away. It's going to be more of that because we're going to be building many agents, not a few.
Yeah.
let me touch upon the question that I actually asked, and I think you added your point on data engineers as well. How does the role of data scientists evolve in this particular world, and how relevant is it?
So a very relevant question. And again, the same way, we clearly see, and we've also called it out in our trends, that you can pick a general model like a GPT-4o or a Cloud 3.5. But when it comes to agents and enterprise use cases, there are a lot of nuances. And if you want that extra punch of reliability, you will need of continual fine tuning. Now, a data scientist also goes through the same phenomena where originally they were doing feature engineering, they were building CSV data sets. which would be fed pandas and scikit-learn and all of that. Instead of that, they would play with a lot more unstructured data. Let's say a preference data set or a COT data set or an RL reward model. But fundamentally, they all have a role to play in continual fine tuning for this whole revolution to succeed.
Mhm. You mentioned about like agentic evolution, right? Like I think, and you talked about like multiple agents playing around and working together, and some agents can be internal agents, some can be an external agent. Like for example, Salesforce or Zendesk might have a better understanding about how the customer support ticket system. They can build a better systems around that, right? But now this is something being done a lot of time. Like we tried to create this interoperability between different external system, all the way from CoreBot to COM, DCOM to RPC to SOAP to
Yeah.
RPC. Like we never, I don't think we succeeded
never
to
thought.
the extent that we
Yeah.
said. So, as a matter of fact, we have Fivetran, a big company for that. Is purely the reason that we failed, that
Yeah.
the external integration. And do you think a multi agents is a real possibility in that economy?
No. So look, there are two definitions here. Multi-agent is happening. And the way I define multi-agent is a single enterprise can also build many agents and use proprietary communication technology, let's say message queuing or PubSub or whatever, to make these agents talk to each other, right? But here, I think you're probably raising a larger question. How can agents between enterprises or between different groups of enterprises communicate with each other and collaborate, right? For example, I'm running a travel agency. You have access to, let's say, the user queries. You have built a personal assistant. Now, user has a query plan. Go get me the plan for my next travel holiday plan. Now, you don't have the expertise of holiday travel planning, let's say.
Yeah.
Now, this is a classic example where you need agents to communicate beyond the organization boundary.
Mm.
And the way this will work, and there are many ways this can work. For example, in the olden days, we had DNS registry, for example, right? What did DNS registry do? It helped basically help you start with the URL, and then it helped you get to the IP address, the exact IP address. You never had to remember the IP address. You could discover the IP address, right? So it acted like a global registry where you had practically every domain registered. Then you had things like, let's say, Google, where you could just search and get to a hyperlink of any website, right? So it acted as a bridge. So the way I see is that there are various tech solutions. It could be on the lines of a protocol or a standardization protocol, like what MCP, like Anthropic did MCP for agent tool interface. Right? It could be an ACP, an agent to agent communication protocol. Or it could also be a registry like a DNS, or it could be a service that something like Google, where you are an agent, like the example we took. You can actually go say, hey, who can help me with my travel planning? And then then you're thrown with 4 or 5 agents and with their rating and what they're good at, which area. For example, travel planning can also become geography specific, for example. It doesn't have to be. So depending on where the user wants to go, you could get to a different travel planning agency, right? So that is really what's going to happen. We will have a bunch of this middle service also for possibly protocol standardization to address this particular piece. And I think we've also called it out. This is one of the moonshots for 2025. And we feel that while agents succeed, we will already start building the next layer, which is how can agents talk to another set of agents across the enterprise world.
I think I have the follow up. It's more of like a philosophical question, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you think like humans and machines, all made of same celestial body, right? Like, more or less. And it goes back to the cost of building those agents. Essentially, I know the productivity boost is there. Machines are much better than human context switching and all sort of things are there. But at what point do you think, or you think like making those multi-agent enable them to work together is so costly that I can hire a human for that to do that one, which would be much cheaper. Similar to way that we do that. Hey, I wanted to go to private
No,
cloud
so-
and versus public cloud, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so here's the way I would put it, that it's always been the case whenever a new tech has come. For example, if you start at the start of the SaaS era, and somebody posted this fairly recently, that building a SaaS in 2000 would need you about $1 million, right? And that cost kept shrinking. And if you, before the agentic era started, you could build a SaaS for $10,000. And now it's practically approaching zero, right? Building a SaaS, right? And I think you will have a similar feeling when you're building now. You will feel that they're not ROI friendly, they're costly, all of that. But as things start improving, as the ecosystem builds, they will start becoming cheaper and cheaper, easier and easier to build. And that's a journey we follow, like we've done for the other technologies as well, right? To go back, and then you would know this well, when S3 first came, a lot of people questioned object storage. It's too pricey, all of that. And today, all the data is on object storage. And I think this play out with agents too. So I think the right way to look at it is the economics is fairly well aligning with agents, and therefore every prediction that you've seen has agents today. Right? And this kind of consensus we don't have if economics was not aligned well.
I think, that's make a very good point, right? We have to summarize if you're a data engineer and what should I think about like my skill set. If I can summarize like 3-4 points, right? Like one is like, you can't live with your past skills. You have to upgrade yourself. The good news is you still have time because agents still costly. It's that people still trying to figure it out. So it's not too late for you if you
want to build many. So there's a volume of work here.
It's more like BI, right? So like how we end up building BI dashboards, hundreds and hundreds of them. I think we'll have agents replace by departments. And I think good topic on its own is like how federated it's going to be, etc. Like we'll talk on it.
I think important point here, pick up the skill set on processing unstructured data, and then I think there's a lot of talk about like world model, like capturing the world model, right? That's essentially an unstructured data for you to the truth. I think it's not too late. Pick up on unstructured data and not things.
A lot of it's can be reimagined as well, right? I mean, like unstructured on how does quality look in an unstructured world, right? It's very different. You think in the structured world, I think a lot of innovations to happen. So it's really good that way.
Totally. I think that's a good situation to say that to go to data platform for 2025. Very happening 2024 for data platform. Modern data stack officially died. So many people declared. So
accelerated data projects. Let's give credit to them. It is due. I think all the layers. I think the siloed nature of MDS has its challenges, but I think it also accelerated the growth of the data platforms as well. Whether it's moving data express, but I think MDS has evolved. Let's put it that way. It's not died. It's evolved.
So I think the thing is that you would see consolidation in the space and more unified platforms emerging potentially out of MDS. I think that's a more logical. Nothing dies in our world. It's always a transformation in a way. So you could see many of these transform into via consolidation, M&A, or whichever way, into a set of unified platforms, or maybe expand into unstructured potentially. So
I think one of the hottest debate on 2024 is centered around Lakehouse, table format, and then the catalog. Companies are launching right and left open, and every company launched their open source version to save the openness of the world. What do you think that layer of Lakehouse or Lake format or these systems gonna be in 2025 and 2026? Like how it's gonna come out?
I did make a statement when Databricks acquired Iceberg that I think we are overhyping this table formats. Because with AI, the table formats are just one of the things you need. You have to start worrying about a lot of unstructured metadata. How are you going to get all this and all of that? So if I'm an enterprise, I'm looking at the use cases. So let's rewind and see, why did this table formats become important? Because the data was locked into these vendor platforms for a while. And enterprises could not work with them because these were proprietary formats, and they want to use another, let's say, SQL engine. They could not use it. That was the primary driver for the table formats, which is that I could have an independent format and use multiple engines to get to access to my data. And I can own my data, which lies in one of these object stores. But what has changed really is, of course, it gives them independence. They can optimize their costs. There are a lot of benefits of having an open format, which I can work across multiple engines. So that benefit is not going away. Having said that, at the end of the day, you're looking at, hey, how can I get my use cases out? And all the focus is on agents at this point. So you will start looking at the benefit side, then the cost optimization side as you prioritize in 2025. And the use cases will drive the priorities. Now, if table formats fall in that priority, that's fine. But if, let's say, the whole priority moves to unstructured onboarding, then that's where most of the resources and the energy will go.
But I think
So my
unstructured is definitely a focus area, Rajesh. But I think the
absolutely, I have no doubt, because I was just talking to Anant yesterday. A lot of these agents now process code, for example. Anant is building one, which is you are basically pulling in your Git repository and passing it to the agents, right? So my sense is that this is already happening. In fact, we built a lot of RAG systems in 2024, which is all about document like content. So what has changed? Let's say BI was a killer application for data, structured data. Everybody wanted business analysis, dashboards, all of that. And that is why BI made the killer. Now, as analysis of documents, talking to documents, all of that becomes so easy with these models, it's an automatic kicker for more applications to arrive in that particular zone. See, unstructured and extracting value out of unstructured was much, much harder just a few years back. And it has become way simpler now, right? And that alone is a super driver for unstructured to be the main application pillar as we go build further.
Yeah, but structured still remains a core of.
But look, it used to be 90-20 or 80-20, 80% structured and 20% unstructured, whereas the data was 80% unstructured and 20% structured.
Yes.
Even after 2 decades investment.
The equation
now that still goes away.
Yeah.
And still wants thing.
Got it. I think let's double click on the Lakehouse.
I think
one of the things that we are seeing across the spectrum is a lot of Lakehouse implementations, standardization of table formats. It's a little debatable because there's not much of differentiation between each of these table formats. It's out there. I think it may be an abstraction layer, most likely, and I think almost every table provider or a table provider or database vendor would start providing those behind the scenes, right? So I think that's
it become a feature of a platform in a way.
Of a platform, yeah, rather. I think that's the way I foresee it. But more importantly, in the data layer, right? I think there's a lot more importance. I think a lot of last year has been pretty good for me personally as well, because a lot of data projects gets acceleration because of AI implementations, and they want to get the right data at the right time and focus on this, ensuring that whatever pipelines they're building is leading towards their broader vision, which is a 18 months to a 24-month kind of a sprint, right? So I think if you unpeel that particular onion and say focus on Lakehouse heavily, a lot of Lakehouse implementations is still, some of them are still on specific to a particular table format, but I think that traction may happen. On the quality side, there's a heavy focus. I think that goes without saying. I think Rajesh and Anand, you both highlighted the importance of quality, the trust for AI, that the data readiness for AI is a key topic. And I think in my point of view, this category of observability was never in limelight. It was that went through a huge downfall, becomes a lot more critical. And what are your thoughts on that?
So I agree with that. You know what? The data quality, data observability will always be a topic. It will never go out of action. It was the traffic. We hyped it up a little more than what it was required.
Yeah.
And then it still is a topic, even though the hype is not there.
Yeah.
Right. So I do not see it going away. The only change that I would want to point out or highlight is, like everything else, when we talk about data quality, we also include unstructured now. Right. So it's not going to be just the table quality or the data that resides in a tabular format. You will have to look at the documents, the images, the videos, all of that, essentially.
I think on the point of this particular thing, like the quality and the unstructured data will be still important. My belief is that is a typical bridge theory, right? There is a traffic congestion and you build a better bridge, and then that will add more traffic because now people know that you can travel as more traffic comes in. We never took unstructured data into data warehouse ever before. Very minimal that we cannot do. Now we have the capabilities comes in, we will see the flow of unstructured data coming in. And the source systems are more incentivized to create unstructured data is because now you can able to process. And creating an unstructured data is much more easier for many applications rather than structuring it, because structuring requires some kind of a manual instrumentation, whether you just flush out your logs is much easier to do that. Right? So we will see the variation will shift, in my opinion, that you will see like maybe 2%, 3% is a structured data, and more unstructured data coming in as we increase the capability.
Yeah, more agents will start using unstructured data, right? Just not the quality base, right? But the lineage of where that data is coming from. Like Rajesh spoke about freshness and reliability and all of that. So I think even the catalog needs to be, we call it catalog, we call it lineage, whatever is the word for it. I think that life cycle, that governance becomes all the more critical. Another aspect that usually gets missed out is privacy on top of it. How are you being compliant with different local, regional, global AI privacy laws when you're even operating on top of these documents? Because what's available for me in India need not be available to somebody reading it from particularly, let's say, UAE or so. All of that needs to be thought through. And there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen. I don't think a lot of data platforms are ready yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and I think what's going to happen is even in data platform, we will start seeing newer and emerging vendors because the diversity of feature requirement is quite high. See, we don't go back to MDS, but at the same time, because there are so many features, it's natural for competitors to cater to a set of needs and another competitor to cater to another set of needs. As you just mentioned, for example, the PIIs, the data masking, the row level filters, what used to be lower level filters could look very different in the case of documents, for example. Right? So as we add more and more capabilities, we will have more and more diverse data platforms with more in where everybody can differentiate on a set of strengths that they have fundamentally. So from an enterprise standpoint, they will have to look at what do they really need when they talk about, because there's no one data platform at the end of it who will give all the things that they need. So where we're heading now is pretty interesting, because privacy, as you mentioned, the GDPR, all of that has to be extended to the next layer, which is the unstructured.
And traditional enterprises still has a lot of unstructured data, right? From loan applications to insurance documents where digital signatures are still there, but then sometimes need a physical hard copy signature. Yeah, you still have unstructured data getting into the system a lot more as well, claims, etc.
Yeah. I think, Ashwin, you made a point about the access control and security and privileges kind of more, maybe, and then like we were processing more and more data, right? If you see the last 6 months of development on this particular space, what is really happening is that, especially on the access control, BigQuery introduced BigLake. Essentially, BigLake, you can query Iceberg table as a managed table, similar way Snowflake introduced. So every Lakehouse database is internally going with a multi-engine model, like you can query Iceberg format or you can query native format, what they're doing this one.
Yeah.
On top of it, what they're really building is, at least what I am aware of, is in the Big Lake model, actually, Big Lake. They're trying to do delegate administration, right? Delegate access model. But the delegation essentially means that the centralized IT team delegate certain resources to be managed by a certain person. Essentially falls under to kind of a decentralized way of managing and administering your data points out to a domain expertise. We know kind of data mesh concept, data product kind of a concept is slowly died out, either it's a platform or not. But when I write newsletters, like I see few of the success stories, a few of the companies trying to implement this concept. And the architecture inherently getting adopted into even the S3 table, for example. S3 table built on top of an IAM access role, so you can provide an access. So more and more access they are trying to do is essentially what they're trying to do is co-locating the access management, but delegating the access management to somebody else. I feel like 2025 that we will talk a little more about this decentralized model, maybe as a conceptual view adopted in different architectural pattern, not necessarily as a separate system that we are thinking of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to just do a little bit of unpeeling the onion, for a lack of a better word. So ingestion became structured to unstructured, right? So quality, any innovations that you are seeing in terms of what's happening in that particular quality governance? Let's quickly highlight some of what we see in 2024. We have seen in 2024, what we potentially should anticipate in 2025.
Mhm.
Being that you would like to highlight Anand, Rajesh, quality governance. I think biggest for this year was Polaris coming from Snowflake. You saw Databricks improve what they do on the technical metadata lineage. Um, some of the catalog players still focusing on the usual bit on business semantics and things like that. But I think what the hyperscalers are really doing with their built-in native technical catalog or technical metadata is really strengthening the value proposition for the future, right? Because that brings in the tightness between data and metadata. I think that's one bit that we saw all through 2024, and I think that's going to really be interesting to watch out this space in 2025. Privacy, governance, anything that you would like to highlight, Rajesh, like any major one?
I think one of the interesting factors to note, data sovereignty and AI sovereignty, because if you see there's a tremendous amount of investment going on across the government influenced on large language model, and there is certain trade wars around that side of it. So that will be interesting to see how that the rules and regulations around the sovereignty kind of going to play an important role or not, and how it is going to impact whether it could be how it's going to impact the data platform of the whole architecture side of it, right? I think that's one of the reason I was thinking like federations going. Yeah, Rajesh, yeah.
No, I wanted to put a spanner in this whole discussion. See, what we are also seeing is commoditization of cloud at the same time. We're seeing a lot of investment in country-specific data centers.
Yeah.
At tier 2, tier 3. In fact, one of the trends for India this year is essentially a rise of data centers, tier 2, tier 3 national champions, right? Now, what does it really mean for all the applications that we have built on these 3 public clouds, including the data platform? If your customer is going to be on one of these tier 3 data centers, how are you going to be able to serve this essentially? So there is definitely a spanner here, which is that we did not invest in multi-cloud over years. And it's likely that a lot of vendors will have challenge getting to their customers because the customer prefers one of these new clouds. Europe has one, which is growing pretty well. I forget the name right now, but this is happening across. As we get into the commoditization of the cloud and the customers have more choices of the base cloud itself, there is an inherent question of how are you going to deploy a software or an agent on these clouds, right? Obviously, this is a debate for another session, but clearly I see that there is an undercurrent of multi-cloud or what Anand calls sovereignty, data sovereignty, AI sovereignty, so on and so forth.
Sovereignty becomes very key, particularly in AI. And I think multi-cloud is another trend for sure a lot of customers are embracing, reducing dependence on one. But I think interoperability becomes key, not just in data, but in overall. That leads to my next layer, which is around compute, right? So again, a lot of open table formats and the whole idea of multi-engine, multi-processing frameworks is also becoming a lot more discussed in some of my conversations. Not sure how much of that you see in production or implementation. You want to quickly talk on that?
Yeah, I think in-memory computing is definitely flowing. Like I personally used in some use cases, almost like 100x performance improvement, right? And there's a saying that if we can solve all the world's problem in a one single computer, the world would have been much better position. But the moment you solve a problem in 2 different computers, that case, all the problems started. Right? I think, but the challenge is that with these systems, the enterprise still not able to adopt those kind of system is because you never know when your data is small and when your data is large. There is a claim from Redshift that 90% of the query is still running on small data sets and big data is dead and all sort of thing. Yeah, it is true. 90% of the workload is like a single node machine. But the 10% workload that runs on like multiple engines are more valuable, like reconciliation pipeline and a computing engine that runs and trying to see last 30 days, what is my revenue looks like, and I wanted a reconciliation back and all those things. These are all very heavily influenced and an important pipeline in an organization. Now that brings a challenge, like unless and until the in-memory system and the big data processing engine seamlessly integrate together, that some intelligent layer on top of it that figure it out, oh, this is my data distribution layer, I'm going to run on my single machine. I'm going to choose a distributed mode for that, abstracting the complexity out of the user unless until that happen. And if you believe that the developers should take this thing, that's not one. I think that's 2025. I wish this kind of evolve more and more, some kind of an abstract layer on top.
Yeah. And I think
Absolutely. And
right.
Anand, you must get rightly. The way I look at it is there is an investment in this area. We have multitude of choices of engines, but we're not leveraging it the right way. Until you have this intelligence emerge on top of it, which depending on the query you're doing, it figures out which is the right engine for it.
It's the right engine.
After that, you will not see people adopting it as well. But I do believe that it will emerge because it's a necessity. Multi-engine is a reality. Come on, from a cost point of view as well, the DuckDB makes a lot of sense for a lot of businesses, right? And then horizontal scaling is easy with DuckDB because you just bring up one node at the end of it, right? So my sense is that you will see movement here, like the other undercurrent of multi-cloud. This will also happen in 2025.
Yeah, but very common multi-engine that we see is Snowflake versus Databricks, right? So very common in most enterprises today. So I
would call it multi-engine, it's a multi-product strategy, not a multi-engine. A multi-engine would essentially be a single platform offering multiple engines. For example, Databricks also offers Snowflake, but that's not going to happen.
Right now it's Databricks equal, yes. They do.
Yeah.
We pretty much covered everything, but I wish that enterprises actually build hundreds of these agents and see the power of it, and all the data engineers and the AI engineers or software engineers transition to their new skills in 2025.
Agents all the way.
What's your wish, Anand?
My wish, agents all the way, that kind of see that one, but I wanted to come off on the edge because I like to have a deterministic system. I don't want to work with a non-deterministic system. So it sees like how this agents kind of going to evolve and how are we going to build an application, a system building on top of a non-deterministic system going to be hugely challenging, especially if you put a non-deterministic system in a business-centric world. And I'm very excited about what are the things a data platform has to prepare for that to empower all this other aspect of it. And then how this fundamental structure that we are going to build is going to challenge. And we are definitely going to move far above than the star indexing, like this change data capture modeling, to an entirely new territory of handling unstructured data, modeling around, capturing change management around unstructured data, capturing change data capture on unstructured data. It's like fantastic opportunity. So it's a great time to be alive as a data engineer.
Oh, wonderful.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I think
my wish list.
New time for everybody, I would say.
No,
we are rebuilding everything. So whenever you're rebuilding, the engine is always happening.
Yeah, I don't know. Just summarizing, my wish list is very simple. I think because I end up talking to a lot of customers and partners, is focus on a very solid foundation. I think that's where a lot of things get missed in my point of view. And I've seen 4 or 5 in my career, right? When I started my career, it was largely Oracle Teradata, became Exadata, Greenplum, and you saw these NoSQL databases, PyCharm, MapReduce, Spark, and all of that. I think in every wave that I've been through, it's been the change that people focus on the hype, miss a very solid foundation. I think not creating a solid foundation is going to set up people for a very big failure, because AI is not cheap, right? You're paying someone. You're not paying the developer, but you're paying somebody else. You're paying the vendor. You're paying for compute. You're paying for your GPU. So it's not cheap. I think putting non-standardized, non-reliable data and driving on the training data set is expensive for different evals and training that you would do. I think focus on a very solid foundation. I just wish all data engineers, architects, and the organization that they work for focus on that particular core in the short term, as some of the other teams pivot into the future. And I think take those moonshots. I think that to me is a very strong wish. And I think one highlight I always, and I saw somebody with a US patent yesterday, is in the world of data quality. I think data quality can never be solved in the structured world. It's very hard, right? I use this analogy quite often in my meetings. You take thousands of pictures and I travel, so I take a lot of receipts, and it gets getting piled up in my Google Photos. But what Google does at the end of the day is it gives me an automated way to delete them after a point in time, saying these have been lying for a long time. Do you want to delete it? And these images are blurred. Do you want to delete it? It optimizes the intelligence into the quality layer becomes a lot more important. And I wish probably the vendors, not largely for the people like data engineers, etc., is to add intelligence into that layer to fix data quality, intelligence into the data stewardship process, because data stewards with a million records which have incorrect attributes are not going to be fixed. Right? So to me, that foundation would and innovation coming from the different sectors in the data space is becoming very critical in the short term.
Awesome. That's almost come to a conclusion. It's a very good long conversation. I learned a lot. I hope you all picked up something new from this conversation. And I wish you Happy New Year and happy holidays one more time. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.